I'm taking my fresh milled flour to honey wheat sourdough today. Welcome to White Shadow Fare. Make it homemade and make it with love. So I'm going to be grinding hard white wheat and hard red wheat, just a mixture 50-50 of each of them. Remember, wheat berries are just the seeds of the wheat. So we want to be keeping the germ and the bran. That's what they do not let you do when you are having all-purpose flour. These seeds pack a ton of nutrition. First, I'm weighing out 485 grams of hard wheat berries. As I said, I'm doing a 50-50 mix here of red and white hard wheats. I've been trying to use different things like einkorn and spelt, but I keep coming back to the standard hard red and hard white. I heard that bay leaves help keep bugs away, so I've been keeping them in my mill. I'm not sure if that's true or not. I've never had bugs in my mill, and I still don't. As you can see here, like magic, those berries turn into a very fine flour. In minutes, we'll be ready to start our recipe. People think that grinding your own wheat is a lot of work, but it really is only a few extra seconds for all that extra nutrition. If you haven't done so already, please like and subscribe. That would mean a lot to me. And leave a comment down below whether or not you make sourdough bread. So there's my 485 grams of flour. To this, we're going to add 380 grams of a warm or room temperature water. You just don't want cold water at all. I have my scale underneath my bowl, so I'm just measuring everything out. Sourdough is generally just a few key ingredients: flour, water, salt, and sourdough starter. This recipe is just adding 2 more ingredients, but they are so worth it. To this, we're going to add 100 grams of an organic raw honey. Now you can use any kind of honey that you want. The recipe called for 15 grams of vital wheat gluten, which I have never used in my entire life when making sourdough bread. I had it on hand, so why not? And of course, you need a bubbly fresh starter. So I fed that early in the morning before I got started with this, and you will need 100 grams of that ready to go starter. And I choose to mix mine with this spatula. There's all sorts of things that you can mix with. There's Danish dough hooks, which are very nice, and I owned one at one point in time. I used my hand at one point in time, but this actually works better than everything, and I'm certainly not a minimalist, but I don't need to have all sorts of extra supplies around my house. So this spatula is the perfect thing. I use the one end for mixing, and then I flip it over and use the spatula end to kind of pull it all together. It will be rather shaggy looking at this point. You want to make sure that you get all of the flour down at the bottom of that bowl incorporated. This is a recipe that does not use a mixer. I used to make a lot of sourdough. I went through a couple of years of making a lot of sourdough, kind of backed off because I've been enjoying making other freshly milled breads, but this one is definitely worth the try. So you're going to wait 30 minutes, and 30 minutes later, you are going to add your salt. 10 grams of salt. I'm using Redmond's real salt here. And in order to get that incorporated, I'm using a spray bottle filled with water. You could have just a bowl that had some water and dip your hands in it and shake the excess water off. You don't want to add a bunch of water to this, but in order to get the dough not to stick, a little bit of water helps. And I'm doing just the pinch and squeeze method of getting the salt incorporated here. As you can see, I'm just kind of grabbing it and squeezing it and then flipping it over and trying to make sure that that salt gets all throughout the dough. And I'm doing a couple of slap and folds where you kind of slap it down into the bowl and fold the top over. And I'm going to cover and give it 30 minutes to rest. It's been 30 minutes and we're ready for the next phase here. Now this is the only major thing that you're going to be doing. It's not kneading, but it's similar to kneading. 3 to 5 minutes of slap and folds with your damp hands. I'm doing this right on my countertop. You could do it on like a pastry board, and you will need a bench scraper because it might stick to the surface and you'll want to scrape that up. And if it begins to get sticky all over your hands, just spray your hands again. So all I'm doing is letting it kind of cool down a little bit, and then I'm slapping it onto the countertop there and then folding it over and picking it up and turning it. And I'm just doing this over and over again for 3 to 5 minutes. Now that time is up and you can see that it got a little sticky, and I sprayed my hands again to try to get it not to stick to my hands. And it's time to go back into the bowl for a short rest. So at this point, I'm just pulling it over and trying to make it into a nice cohesive ball of dough, adding a little bit of tension across the top of the dough. And I'm going to cover it and let it sit for 30 minutes. Been 30 minutes. And it is time to get started on the stretch and folds. Now, if you have never done sourdough before, a stretch and fold, get those hands nice and damp, is very easy to do. You kind of grab a piece of the dough, stretch it out until it won't stretch without breaking, and then fold it over. And as you start to do this, you're going to notice that the first couple stretch really easy, and then it doesn't stretch as easily, and it doesn't go as far. And when it gets to the point where it's really not going anywhere, you know you're done with your stretch and folds for that set. So usually about 4 to 8 of those at the most. So now we're going to cover and rest for another 30 minutes, and we'll come back and do another set of stretch and folds. So it's been 30 minutes, and it is time for our second set of stretch and folds. Dampen those hands. First couple pull really nice. Fold them over, and then I start to feel a little bit of resistance. It will not go as far. And this is totally normal, and it just means that you're building strength in your dough. So once again, you're going to cover and let it rest for another 30 minutes and come back for another set of stretch and fold. So it's been 30 minutes. We are doing another set of stretch and folds here. Get those hands damp. And once again, you will notice that you will not be able to stretch as far, and you will not be able to do as many of these as you were at the beginning because your dough is getting stronger and stronger. So to get it kind of tied back into a nice cohesive ball, I just do a couple of slap and folds there at the end. That's not required, it's just something I always do. And then you wait 2 hours. So we did 3 sets of stretch and folds. Now we're waiting 2 hours, and at this point your dough is done fermenting for the day. So you're going to get your hands damp, and you are going to do what is called a pre-shape. So I am just taking the 2 corners in, and then the bottom 2 corners, and then the sides, and then I'm going to roll it up. Now it might look like I'm being kind of tough with the dough, but you are really being quite gentle because you want to keep as much air in that dough as you can. I just turned the bowl upside down to keep it from getting dried out, and you are going to let that sit and rest. And while that is resting, I grabbed a piece of parchment paper and a bread pan, and I'm just scrunching up that parchment paper, and now I'm spraying on a little bit of water. You could also just put your parchment paper, scrunch it up, and put it under the faucet real quick. I don't want this dripping wet, I want it kind of damp. But even if you got it really wet and squeezed all the water out, this just makes it conform to your bread pan that much easier. And it really isn't, your dough isn't going to stick to it. When you're done baking in this, it'll be fine. But you're not going to be ready to bake until the next morning. Once again, wrinkled parchment paper, get a little bit of dampness to it, and it will conform to that pan. And now we are going to do the final shaping. So just like we did the last time, we are going to fold those corners in, top and bottom. We're going to fold the sides in, and then we are going to roll this up. And this time, instead of going into a round, we're going to go into more of a loaf shape. We're going to flip it over, and we are going to pinch the seams shut so it doesn't kind of come apart at the seams while it is in the bread pan. And then we're going to put it seam side down right into our bread pan so that it can rise in the refrigerator overnight. You can't just put it in the refrigerator by itself. You need to cover it with something. So I put a clean tea towel on top of it, and then I'm putting this into the plastic bag that when it's completely done, I will be storing my bread in. And these are these jumbo 2-gallon bags. I love them because they hold all of my bread. So it's going into the refrigerator overnight. So the next morning I am preheating my oven to 500 degrees Fahrenheit. I have a Dutch oven inside that oven. And I'm using my oven rack as a cooling rack here because I wanted to pull it out. It was kind of in my way. So I'm scoring the loaf. As you can see here, I'm not doing anything fancy because I am leaving it in the bread pan. I like to use my sourdough for toast, so I don't want some sort of crazy shape that doesn't fit into my toaster easily. My Dutch oven was in the oven during the preheating time, so it is quite hot. So handle with care. If you do not have a Dutch oven, you could go ahead and just place on the very bottom rack a pan filled with hot water. And then after 45 minutes, you are going to take the lid off. Now, at this point, I realized, I forgot to turn the oven down. What you're going to do is 500 for the preheat, and as soon as you put your bread in, you're going to drop it to 450 degrees. I forgot to do that, took my dog for a walk, came back, took the lid off, and realized it was a little dark. I was a little bit nervous about that because my granddaughter certainly isn't going to eat anything that looks like that. But it tasted perfectly fine. It does not taste burnt at all, so I got lucky there. But part of the reasoning for doing the dropping down to 450 is it stops it from burning. And then with the honey in there, it's going to brown a little bit faster than a regular sourdough bread would. So I'm going to let my bread cool for 6 hours or longer. I did mine overnight, and then when it was nighttime, I just threw a tea towel on top of it. And in the morning, I'm ready for toast. So I'm going to slice up my bread and make myself some beautiful toast for breakfast. And you can see that this slices very nicely. Now, all sourdough bread is a little bit harder to slice than regular bread, but I can slice thinner slices. The crumb is very nice. It's a very typical whole grain, 100% whole wheat sourdough bread. We don't get those huge holes that you might get in an all-purpose flour sourdough. So if you've never cooked sourdough or made sourdough with whole grains before, that's what you're going to see. It is a slightly sweet sourdough. It tastes great just with butter on it. I want to thank you for joining me here at White Shadow Fare, and please give this one a try. Leave me a comment below if you like making sourdough